Good day, everyone. Welcome to Real Conservative News. I'm your host, Nathaniel Rajkumar. Please stay with me for the next 10 to 15 minutes as I highlight the latest news events and provide commentary for February the 12th, 2026 regarding local, regional, and international security, political, and social issues. Starting off locally here in Trinidad and Tobago, Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Dr. Kennedy Sarawat Singh, is refuting claims that Trinidad and Tobago was heading toward an international monetary fund intervention, insisting the recent engagement was nothing more than the fund's standard annual review. Now, when I checked online yesterday, it doesn't seem as though it has to be mandatory intervention, though. I believe a country could reject that intervention. But nevertheless, who is responsible for having this country in such a terrible state? Who was governing the country for the past 10 years? It's PNM people. And yet PNM are now trying to blame the UNC government for the economic crisis that continues to take place in our country. That doesn't mean that UNC isn't making certain errors. Huh? Right. So my response, the CM-PNM government, which taxed our nation into poverty, is now claiming that there will be an IMF intervention here in TNT. Ain't that a joke? The sad reality is that the government appears, though, and this is where I am being real and I will never be just a blind supporter of the UNC. The sad reality is that the government appears to be adopting PNM and the IMF's socialistic draconian measures, which will reduce the purchasing power of the mass population, the working and middle class. You cannot tax a nation into prosperity, people. I don't know why the IMF and a lot of these far-left radical types of governments and regimes and political parties try to preach that gospel of taxation. All you're doing is taking more money away from the people, which reduces their purchasing power. What do you think? What do you expect to happen to the businesses, especially the medium-sized and the small businesses? So I said you cannot tax a nation into prosperity. Taxpert had the audacity to accuse the government of wasting money after mentioning how public servant salaries were increased. Yes, that is a waste of money, giving people proper salaries, public servants proper salaries. While I don't support the increase in fines, fees, and introduction of the landlord tax, they should have just been charged a normal income tax. The government must be commended for ensuring that public servants receive a reasonable wage increase. And the next time around, it shouldn't be 10% for that long duration or that long period. I think it's 20 to 2022 is next. Should be 10% for that period now, or even more. I'm asking the Prime Minister again, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, to please return to UNC's traditional types of policies, which were very similar to America's Republican, conservative, capitalist economic policies. Some of those policies are lower taxes and regulations, which of course will encourage foreign companies to invest in Trinidad and Tobago, which also will assist in our nation's recovery. That's what we need, foreign investment. You should also focus on reopening Petrotrin, which was the backbone of the industry and the backbone of our economy by extension. Once the refinery is operating again, a significant amount of foreign revenue will be generated. Forex, what we need, Forex, right. While also providing high-paying jobs for citizens of our country. And what those individuals that get these high-paying jobs will do, they will spend their money in their communities, within the small businesses, the little supermarkets, the shops, and so forth, people. When the purchasing power of the middle class is increased, both small and medium-sized businesses will, not might, will prosper again. Police shooting victim Kea Seeley is refusing to give up her fight for justice, even as she remains confined to a hospital bed and continues to be denied access to police records and her personal devices. She says she will not give up until the world knows the truth about the January 20th fatal shooting incident in St. Augustine that claimed the life of her common-law husband, Joshua Samaru. My response? To those of us who aren't blinded by politics, stand in solidarity with you, Kea. Rest assured that even if the justice system fails, God will hold the Commissioner of Police and politicians accountable for their statements and actions. Yes, politicians as well. Because Roger Alexander, up to now, the Minister of Homeland Security has never once condemned the actions taken by those police officers and continues to say that the entire story isn't being told. It does not matter what is the entire story, Roger Alexander. The reality remains, no matter what was the reason for police officers pursuing that individual, Joshua Samaru, the reality remains that he surrendered. He placed his both hands up in the air, and yet he was fired upon and was killed. And his common law wife is now disabled. She's a cripple now because of that. Thank God they did not go and pick up the child. I think they went to pick up the child from school or something like that. Thank God that the baby girl or the baby boy, I can't remember, wasn't in that vehicle. Otherwise, most likely, that little baby would not have been with us today. Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation Eli Zakur says a sharp drop in ticketing should dispel the misconception that the government is using higher fines to raise revenue. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. You know very well, it doesn't matter if there's a sharp drop, and that's just a short space of time since these fines were imposed. You know very well at some point in time there will be a spike again, and you're going to generate money. And it doesn't matter how much money you're generating, it's still generating a lot. I'm sure it's still in the millions. Speaking on Trinidad and Tobago today, he said, instead of a spike many expected, fixed penalty tickets issued dropped sharply on a year-on-year comparison. You're talking about just a couple months now, you know, people. They didn't wait at 6 months. They didn't wait at 9 months. They didn't wait 1 year, you know. They want to compare month by month. And we have this whole of 2026 to go. He said, I received some stats just about an hour ago, but that was yesterday, from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. For the same period last year to now, road fatalities are down by 62%. Telling you, and you want to base that on statistics gathered, all right, or collected within about 2 months. My response, this man for real? All of a sudden, road deaths are down by 62% just because you're ticketing people for having old vehicles? Because I want to know how many of these tickets issued is pertaining to speeding and DUIs. Can you all tell us? Can Zakur tell us, or the police tell us, how many of these these tickets issued were because of violations of speeding and DUIs? Those are the offenses that should have very hefty fines and also be a jailable offense after after somebody has repeated the same crime, repeated the same offense. Because those are the types of offenses that cost people their lives on the roadways. Not because somebody have an imperfect, a defective, as they call it, vehicle. Not because they have an old-time little Toyota C or a Gallant. Means that you should be fined because of it, or because a coconut vendor doesn't have a perfect vehicle, that they should be fined $19,000 for it. No, people. There are actual things to focus on that I support, which is the speeding and the DUIs. So I said all of a sudden road deaths are down by 62% just because you're ticketing people for having old vehicles. And people will say, as I said before, that it's not only old vehicles. But I'm telling you, those are the things that people are against. Is those minor traffic offenses being doubled is what people are against. They don't care about the speeding and stuff like that. Everybody knows speeding is wrong, even though they love to do it. So that has a need for speed. Meanwhile, most of the vehicles involved in accidents are in perfect condition, people, and are also insured. The vast majority of accidents you see on the nation's roadways aren't with drivers or owners of older vehicles, little old 80 wagons, or as I said, a Gallant or a Cortina, or I haven't seen a Cortina in a long time, boy. But and a 280C and those types of vehicles. You don't see those vehicles getting involved in accidents very often. It's the new vehicles, it's the foreign used vehicles that look in perfect condition and pass inspection. Those are the vehicles that are getting into accidents. The year has now begun. And yet you want to start reporting statistical data already? Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar, you need to deal with your ministers and stop ignoring their inappropriate statements, Madam Prime Minister. You're making UNC really head on a wrong path in some ways. Not always, but in some ways. Roger Alexander, Tanku, and Zakur need to be replaced. I'm not telling you get them out of the administration completely, but put them in different ministries and also in junior minister roles. The St. Vincent and the Grenadines opposition leader, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, has dubbed Budget 2026 a failure for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, even though people voted you out, and they must have voted you out for a reason, Ralphie. In his contribution to the budget debate on Tuesday, Dr. Gonsalves said that the estimates were not carefully planned. Your plans were any better, and yet people voted you out? And expressed the view that the budget sets the country backward. The opposition leader noted that some projects are unclear, particularly in terms of how they will be executed, and called for explanations. The only explanation you should try to find out is why you lost the elections, and in a significant way as well.
Madam Speaker, these estimates are a major failure for the country. They're bad. They're wrong. They're going to lead us to damnation. Listen to what I have said to you today. This is an awful budget. A speech. I noticed in the speech, you abandoned the idea of, you had 4 pillars going in. Agriculture, fisheries, tourism, and you had, well, the blue economy, and then you had the orange economy. You have dispensed with the orange economy and call it a new economy now, dealing with IT. One of the fellas who wrote this thing for you, wrote that for him in 2000, you know.
Jamaica's Finance Minister, Favour Williams, says new taxes, everything is tax, will be introduced to fund the upcoming budget as the Holness administration contends with the economic fallout from Hurricane Melissa, following the Democrats, following the IMF. Everything is always taxes the solution. It's an impoverished population of people that have lost their homes, their everything. She says the most vulnerable will be protected. How? The move will break the administration's decade-long position of imposing no new taxes. They were right for doing that. As much as Andrew Holness was governing the nation in a very mediocre style, at least that no new taxes type of policy was preventing the cost of living from rising in any significant way to make life harder for the citizens. When you take away the purchasing power, as I said before, of the middle and the lower class, what do you expect to happen? My response, as I said earlier, when it pertains to Trinidad, you cannot tax a nation into prosperity or recovery. All you're going to do is decrease the purchasing power of the mass population. Why do so many of our Caribbean nations' leaders adopt the U.S. Democrats' socialist style of governance? Is the IMF preaching their tax austerity measure gospel to Jamaica the same way I believe they are doing here in TNT? I don't believe this is just about Tanko and them, you know. I believe the IMF in the background is telling them, tax the people. Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce in Guyana, Susan Rodriguez, has confirmed that work is underway to operationalize the much anticipated Guyana Development Bank. Look at the difference. Irfan Ali is investing in his people, not taxing his people. I'm not saying it doesn't have taxes there already, but what I'm saying, bringing new taxes and placing more burdens upon the population. So anyhow, so the much anticipated Guyana Development Bank, which will provide collateral-free, interest-free loans to small and medium-sized enterprises. You know why? It seems as though Irfan Ali understands that when you empower the middle class, when you empower even the working class, that is going to generate extra revenue. That is going to stimulate the economy because people will have what? Increased purchasing power. I'm not saying Irfan Ali is perfect. I'm not saying every decision that he makes is perfect. I don't really agree with how he's also focusing on issuing fines and stuff like that for every traffic offense. Focus on the speeding and so forth. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he's doing a whole lot better than any of the other Caribbean leaders at this point in time. International news now. For the first time since 9/11, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has closed the airspace over El Paso, Texas for 10 days amid special security concerns. This decision was triggered by Mexican cartel drones. Cartel drones breaching U.S. airspace, officials told CBS News. War Department took action to disable the drones, thankfully. Closing off now with the interesting facts segment. Recent research has raised concerns that Generation Z may be the first in modern history to score slightly lower on average IQ and cognitive tests compared with millennials and Generation X. I believe I'm a millennial, right? I was born 1982. But anyhow, experts link this trend in part to our growing dependence on smartphones. Well, not our, because as I said before, I'm supposed to be a millennial. I just keep forgetting it though, but I believe so. So their growing dependence on smartphones, AI tools, and bite-sized digital content that dominate daily life. It is a fact, people. Everything now is AI. All my commentary, everything that I say is based on my own personal opinions. I don't go and ask AI, give me commentary for all these different news reports and I will just read it aloud for you. No, it comes from my heart. It comes from how I feel as a human being, not as an AI. Studies suggest these technologies can reduce sustained attention, memory recall, and deep critical thinking skills, and that is what I'm so concerned about. And I raised that issue when that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, someone was speaking about that, how they were applauding the students for doing their work without the use of modern technology, without going and allowing AI to give them all the information, in other words. So global data indicates that measurable declines began emerging around 2010, coinciding with the rise of social media and mobile connectivity. Researchers caution that awareness, not alarm, is key in adopting healthy media habits. Do everything, people, in moderation. That's what the Bible says. Of course, doing everything doesn't mean everything, eh? It has limitations of what you can do as well. But do normal things in moderation. Folks, that brings us to the end of today's news report. Thanks again to everyone who continues to support my content. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay blessed and stay safe, most of all, in Jesus' name.